welcome to the Open Mic, the show where every episode I talk to writers, editors, agents, occasionally a songwriter or a playwright about their work and the publishing industry. I'm your host, Rich Ehisen, and I am very happy today to be joined by someone who's become a frequent visitor to the Open Mic, the fabulous, wonderful, beautiful mystery and crime fiction writer, Tori Eldridge, who is here to talk about her new book, Dance Among the Flames. Tori, hello and welcome back to the Open Mic. It's a pleasure to have you back.
Well, hey, Rich, it's always fun to chat with you on the air.
Oh, well, I love that. Hey, let's get into this a little bit because, as I said, you've got a new book out. I read it. It's great. And it is also a major departure from the Lily Wong series. And really anything else of yours that I've ever read. It was very unique and expansive, and I was really excited about it. So tell us about Dance Among the Flames. I have a bunch of questions about it, but maybe just give us the nickel tour for someone who's maybe read some Lily Wong books and maybe would just like to hear what's our basics here on Dance Among the Flames.
All right. Well, first off, it's not crime fiction. So I should warn you, it's dark. It's very dark. So if you've read Lily Wong, I want you to be warned before you step into this wild Brazilian world that I've created here. So yeah, it's, I suppose if I had to categorize it, maybe dark literary horror. With elements of historical fiction, women's fiction, and of course, the last quarter of it is as action-packed thriller as any story I've ever written. So, there's always that. And there is an extraordinary female protagonist. So that's the other thing you can count on. Serafina Olegario is a fearsome woman. And we meet her as this desperate teenage mother who rises from the slums of Bahia to become a powerful Quimbanda priestess, a wielder of Black Quimbanda magic. So yeah, it's got Brazilian gods and passion and betrayal and horror and sex and oh my God, it's quite a wild ride. It spans 40 years, 3 continents, and a past incident in 1560 France. So when you said expansive, yes, it's most definitely that.
Absolutely. It covers a lot of ground. I will absolutely agree with you. A lot of mysticism, as you noted, a lot of gods, there's a lot of Brazilian religion and mysticism. But you also explore themes of classism, various forms of emotional and physical abuse. I mean, they're, as you said, it's dark. There's themes. It's dark, but it's not hopeless or depressing. I want to make sure I say that because as a reader, it never felt like, oh, this is overwhelming or whatever. It felt more like, yeah, these are dark themes, but interwoven the way you did with all of the mysticism and the gods and there was method to all of the madness going on around, and it was very fast moving. So if you would tell me a little bit more, though, about some of those themes and how you chose to work all of those themes in together.
Yeah. Well, it started with a deep fascination with Brazil. And this came from a screenplay that I wrote in the 1990s. And when I was working on that, I really wanted to dive into this culture and find what it was about it that really spoke to me, what was so fascinating about it. And it was the religion, the spiritualism. The majority of Brazilians are Catholic, but that's not the religion I'm talking about. I'm talking about Umbanda or Candomblé, as it's called in Bahia state. And a lot of people know it as Santeria, but that's, more what it's called in other locations. But the Brazilian religion is a blend. It comes from the Yoruba, the African Yoruba religion brought over by the slaves, but it's also blended with the Brazilian animism and ancestral worship, which is just so incredible. And of course, they had to hide all of this from the slave masters because they weren't having any of that. And so they syncretized it with the Catholicism. And so it's incredibly unique and rich and just fascinating. And of course, it involves channeling spirits so that practitioners can engage with the spirits one-on-one. And I found that to be just tremendously empowering and similar to what goes on, here with the New Age and the channeling and all of that. And so it was very interesting in how many common themes there were, positive themes with even Western religions. And of course, there's the dark side, and that just sucked me in. So that was that whole fascination. Now, when I came across Serafina and I understand who she was and where she's coming. I mean, she grew up in those stilt shack slums that are built into the water, of the inlets, this kind of extreme poverty. And there's a whole lot of bigotry that's, as anywhere really, but also in Brazil, because of all the mixed blood, there's colorism, the value of lighter skin versus darker skin, the Portuguese Brazilian versus the more Afro-Brazilian, that sort of thing. And so these things just came out, and I wanted to address them. And I had to address them because they were part of Serafina's world. And, as she is so consumed with her mission for power and revenge, and in her mind, justice, we see the things that she's dealing with coming up from poverty. And so, yes, there is a lot of different kinds of abuse. And from there came themes of really diving into what is enslavement, what is entrapment, what is psychological entrapment, what is that about? And so, I found it to be rather delicious to to dive into that and really investigate it.
Well, and one of the themes within that, certainly when we talk about the abuse, it's not always necessarily abusive, but it's so clear that in the society that you are talking about, women were so not valued in this world, right? I mean, she's essentially the granddaughter becomes a trophy wife, and it just seems like her whole life, this driving need for revenge becomes because of how badly she is treated by every male in her life, her family, her lovers. They just disregard her so much and treat her like she's such a second-class citizen. You could see why she would want revenge on all of these awful men.
I'm kind of glad that you said that, because that was something that I really wanted to introduce Serafina as a very empathetic, sympathetic character. I want you to feel for her. I want you to understand, so that when she starts to cross the line, I want you to start questioning, slowly questioning how you feel about where she's going and what she's doing, because I find this gray area of human behavior to be so fascinating. It's not good or bad. Is maybe good actions and bad actions, and what is the tipping point and where is that going? I really enjoy things like that, and I hope the reader will constantly be switching up their opinion and how they feel about not just Serafina, but everybody throughout.
Yeah, because we're very familiar with the archetype of the antihero, but the antihero is almost always male, almost always. I can only think of a handful that I've ever read where the antihero is female, and so she came across that way a lot to me. Yeah, she's not always doing good things, and some of it is really bad. but you understand to some extent why. She didn't just come out of the womb bad. She has been formed by what has happened in her world. And I thought you did a very good job of showing that without beating us over the head with it. This story incubated with you for a very, very long time, didn't it?
Yeah.
Tell me more about this evolution from where the seed to now, where you're at with it now.
Yeah. Like I said, it began with a screenplay, and that screenplay got a semifinals nod for the Academy Nicole Fellowship, and people who read it kept encouraging me to write a novel. The prose, the language, the world. And so I did. And I really enjoyed that process. However, at that time in my life, I really wanted to focus on raising my sons. I was a full-time mother with projects, lots of projects, like going away and doing movies. And I had just discovered the martial arts, and I had no idea I was going to become so obsessed with that. And so it wasn't until later, fifth degree black belt, sons are older, web store, empowerment book, things like that, that I just had to go back and write fiction. And so I finally got an idea. I was one of these tragic writers who desperately wanted to write and had no ideas. I'm always hearing about these authors. Oh, I will never live long enough to write everything in my mind. I just want to kill them. No, but I more feel like that now, but I certainly didn't feel it like it then. So I had an idea, and I went back and I started writing, got a few chapters into it, and I went, whoa, 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 what is that book in my cupboard? And I brought it out, very early version of it, and I went, whoa, this is some intense stuff. And that's when I really dug into it, and it became the project on which I learned my craft. It became the project that brought me into the International Thriller Writers, the Horror Writers Association, developed my community. I learned my craft, my business with it. It was such an, as you can tell, as you know from reading it, it was such an epic tale that could be told in so many ways, from so many points of view, in so many different time structures. And I basically tried them all over several years. So although this is the fourth book that's being published, it's actually the first book I ever completed. And at one point, a version of this was in submission with the Ninja Daughter. And I was just like, I was busy writing. I was, I had other books, mapped out, partially written, and I had begun a fifth book, and I was halfway through, and I was just like, well, I'll leave it up to the gods, right? Which one hits first? And that was Lily. And so, that's why it seems like such a departure. But in fact, Dance Among the Flames, the story behind it, is what set me on the path to writing.
Well, I find that really fascinating, and particularly something you said about how this is the book through which you learned your craft. I have read some authors who have pontificated the thought that nobody should start out their writing career trying to write a book because it's just too hard. You should try short stories or novellas or anything other than trying to write a novel, because novels are, just so unbelievably challenging. And yet I've always felt, yeah, but don't you learn something that way? I've never had anyone else support that thought until just now when you said it. So, how do you feel about that? I mean, you would, maybe tell me more about that. What did you learn in this process? What was the lessons that you took out of writing? As you say, first, number one, I guess, is patience, because, it ended up going to the back of the line and had to wait its turn. But what other lessons did you learn in the process of writing this book?
Yeah, I would start off by saying it kind of depends, what you're like as a person. I've never had problems finishing anything. I've taken on very big endeavors in my life, and I finished them. And so that isn't a challenge for me. If it was a challenge for me, then perhaps starting with shorter stories or a novella would have been a very smart move for me. But I had, for whatever reason, I had this huge, expansive idea that I wanted to write. And that's what captivated my attention. And I think more than anything, that's what's important, right? If you're going to be in it for the long haul, you've got to be working on something you're passionate about. You have to be working on something that's going to keep your attention and your fascination. And this kept my attention for decades. And so I think, that was a good signal to me that this had some meat in it. And it was an interesting thing because, like I said, I had different ways of trying this novel. And when I say I redid it, I don't just mean rewrites. I mean, I re-envisioned it. It was this character's story, or it was this character's story. It ended like this, or it didn't end like that. There was one rewrite that began with me cutting 7 chapters. I just took out 30,000 words and stuck it in a file for another book and said, not in this one. So I explored so many different things. I explored different points of view. The first time around, it was sort of this omniscient third person. And then I went into these close third person. I even tried at once taking the main character, which at that time was not Serafina, and putting that character in a first person. I tried it chronologically. I tried it beginning here and flashbacks. I tried it in converging character themes. I mean, literally, there were so many ways I could tell this book. And every time that I felt that I had really nailed that, then I submitted it, or had an agent, submit it in that version. And so there was a tremendous amount of feedback. And I was so fortunate in that I met so many amazing editors through conferences. And I was able, even before I had an agent, to submit it to, big 5 publishers, 5 of them. And many of them became very, very good friends and strong supporters who were really wonderful in continued feedback and encouragement and support. And so I was able to build so many relationships that helped me along the way. So that's why I say it became the project on which I learned my craft. And some authors will write several novels before they find the one that hits. But this story was so big that there was so much room to explore within this one story.
Well, I will tell you, I'm fascinated by a lot of that process. Every time I tell this story, it sounds like I'm trying to be a name dropper. I am not. But one of my guests one time on the show was Jess Walter, and he told me it took him 13 years to write The Beautiful Ruins. 13 years, and the characters all changed. It went from, that's very similar to what you just talked about. This person was the focal point in this version, and then later the final version, the female lead throughout the whole book, and the original was a man, and vice versa. I mean, so I when I hear writers tell me that, I am so inspired. It's an inspiring thing because it feels like the underlying message there is do not quit. It's your vision, keep to it. Even if it changes, it's your change, and just don't quit. So I'm impressed as all hell by that, because that would, most people, when they get that stuck, their answer is to stop. And it sounds like for you, the answer was to just change and keep going.
Oh, I was so exhilarated. With all the feedback. I mean, my very first experience with feedback had to do with the screenplay. All right, before I honed it down and it got that wonderful acknowledgement, there was a hideous attempt at a screenplay that came before. And my sister was very close friends with a big writer producer. They had a hit TV show at the time, and convinced him to do her a favor and read and critique my screenplay. And God bless him. He invited me to his home and sat there at the dining room table. And for 3 hours, he destroyed it. I mean, he just went through it line by line. I mean, it was just, I mean, he was very kind. He was very kind, but I mean, really, there was just so much wrong with it. And my reaction was exhilaration. I couldn't take notes fast enough. Everything he said was just blowing my mind and making me want to write. And so I raced back home. And the first thing I did was scrap the whole thing because I realized it was unsalvageable. And what I needed to do was go back into Brazil and find out what it was that was at the heart of my fascination. And that's when I found this story. And I went back and I rewrote this whole thing. And 3 months later, I called him and I said, will you read it again? And of course, oh my God, this poor guy, I could just see him, going, oh, how good a friend am I to her sister? And he did, bless him. And, 2 days later, he called me on the phone. And he said, I cannot believe I'm telling you this, but you have written a really good screenplay. But my first experience with feedback was like that. So when I dove into the novel stuff, and like I said, I was so fortunate to be able to go to these conferences and sit down with these amazing agents and editors who I think they just felt the passion and excitement and they wanted to help me and they did. And so I just ate it up. And here's the thing, boy, if you want somebody to mentor you, be excited about being a mentee, and I always was. Whenever I got rejections in the email, it was like, ooh, what did they say? What's the gem I can pull from this? And it was like these epiphanies would explode. And so for all those years, it was exciting. And when I thought I nailed it, it would go into submission, I'd write something else. And when I finished that, I'd have an epiphany and I'd rewrite it in a new way. And I just kept doing that.
That is maybe the best lesson any aspiring writer, I think, could get is, what you just said, take feedback, and no matter how negative it might feel at the time, and turn it into something incredibly positive and learn from it. And I would say anyone that's watching this on YouTube, as opposed to listening to the podcast, take a look at the proof over your right shoulder. Where all your books are on display, and over your left shoulder, all the other books on display. I mean, clearly it was a recipe for success. And that's one of the reasons, Tori, I always enjoy talking to you about these things, because you're always so positive about the process. And the process beats a lot of people down, and that doesn't seem to beat you down at all. It seems to invigorate you. And that's such a great lesson for people for how to take, because I've described getting published in this day and age is, you're trying to hit a moving target from 500 yards with a blow dart, right? and that's probably what it feels like to a lot of people. It just feels like, well, I'm never going to be successful here. The hurdles are too high. The gates are locked too tight. It's stacked against me, whatever it is you want to feel like. But you are living proof that, look, I wrote something that was awful. I'll say now maybe it was awful, but look at me now, because I didn't quit and I just kept getting better and better and better at it. So that's a major kudo. I mean, I really think people need to hear that when they're thinking about their own challenges. I mean, they need to hear what you're saying, that challenges it's not doesn't have to be the end. And I really admire that in how you approach things.
Well, I appreciate that. It took 7.5 years before I got the Lily Wong contract. In that time, when I finally got that 2-book deal, right? I had 2 books in submission. I had 2 books that could follow each of those, completely outlined, summarized, and with many, many chapters written. And I had a 5th novel completely outlined and half written. And in between those things, I have been writing short stories. You had mentioned about short stories. I'm a big believer in short stories. It may not be the first thing you write, but I really think it's a wonderful thing to clear your palate with short stories, or even to take a break and write them in between, for a number of reasons. One, it gives you a chance to, like I said, clear the palate, try new things, get to beginning, middle, end submission faster. And also it gets your name out there. It gives you, you get into the submission process, you get the feel of that, you start building connections. And as one of them gets published and another gets published, it starts to build like a snowball, where people now, they read this or they heard something that you talk about, they invite you into an anthology. Now you have something else. When I had my website, because I was in martial arts and I used to teach and I used to travel the country doing seminars, and I had a nonfiction book, and I had a clothing line of meditation, jewelry and malas and clothing and stuff like that. So I had a website decades before I was a writer, which is not something most writers have. And so when I decided to commit to writing, I revamped the whole theme and appearance and intention of that website. But at that time, all I had were short stories, but I had 3 of them published. And so something else in the works. And so I built this whole brand, I guess, around that. So short stories can be really helpful on a number of levels. And, right now I just had a short story come out in the Crime Hits Home. It's the 2022 Mystery Writers of America anthology. And I dive into my, first time I've ever done it, dive into my native Hawaiian roots. And when I was working on that novel, as has happened several times before, I realized I was laying out a novel. And so I'm writing that now. That's the other thing that short stories can do. They can inspire longer works. That happened with the Lily Wong series. It obviously happened with Dance Among the Flames. It's happening with this new Hawaii thing. It happened with a dystopian fiction. I had an anthology and I wrote this novel that I unfortunately had to scrap because of the pandemic. It just hit too close. But yeah, short stories, I'm a big believer in writing them.
Well, you mentioned, your Hawaiian background. You're very multicultural. And I wanted to ask you about how familiar were you with Brazilian culture and mysticism before you started in on this, however many years ago? Because, you seem to really know what you're talking about. So, how familiar were you with all of that before you got into this?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I'm Hawaiian, Chinese, Norwegian. I grew up in Honolulu, and my parents met and married, and my sisters were born in Japan. So right there, we've got the big melting pot. And so I think growing up in Hawaii, I've been very open to and interested in other cultures, not just my own. Everybody's culture. And with that comes religions. I'm very fascinated by world religions. I think because they are so distinct, and yet there are these core themes and commonalities. We can say the same about human beings. And so I enjoy celebrating the distinction and hunting for the commonality. And so world religion is something that's very intriguing to me. So what came first, the chicken or the egg? I got this idea to place this story that I had in Brazil. And that sent me into research. And then when that didn't work, I dived deeper into Brazil. And that's when I really became fascinated. And then as it turned out, right about that time, my son switched into a Montessori preschool, and his teacher was from Rio de Janeiro. And she became a friend of mine and a close connection and, research resource for this, this early venture into Brazil. Because keep in mind, this was the 1990s, and I was not an early adapter, and neither was my husband. So I was writing on word processors that were black and white and were not connected to this thing called the internet. Right. I don't know. There was Google searching long before I knew it was a thing. It took me forever to figure out email. I was so behind on everything. So I was doing all my research in, libraries with books and research rooms where you're not allowed to take things out and you're furiously writing notes, and maybe they let you, Xerox things, and oh my gosh, yeah, encyclopedias and things. And so I would verify a lot of these things and get personal accounts and talk to this friend of mine. And one day I called her, I had a question, and she's like, "Oh, Tori, I'm so sorry, but I'm hopping on a plane. I'm going home to Rio. Oh, you should come." And I went, "What?" And I had two sons, and the youngest one was like a year old, my poor husband. I hadn't been on a plane in years. In 10 days, I got a passport, a visa, left him with two tiny boys, hopped on a plane, and I was only there for 3 nights because I managed to arrive at the tail end of her visit and then came home with her to Los Angeles. But while I was there with family. We stayed with her aunt, who, lived in kind of a poorer section, a little bit more dangerous section, but we celebrated and watched the semifinalist of, the soccer match in her other cousin's high-rise apartment and looking at that. And so I was able to see Rio, and they took me around on business things. And, I was able to see it from a local point of view and also as a tourist, because they showed me the sights. And that was really valuable because, of course, the characters in my story were looking at Brazil from 2 different areas.
Right.
So all of this just made me so incredibly fascinated. So when I put this away, I still carried that fascination. So I was still, had my eye on Brazil. And then when I decided to dive back into this, and this was, maybe 10 and a half years ago. Now, hey, internet. Now I was able to really research things in depth in ways that I didn't have a reach before. And that research has continued, and I would say still continues to this day. That's how fascinated I am by Brazil.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you envision exploring any other areas of cultural spirituality or mysticism in a future book?
Actually, yes. I have a work in progress that has been waiting for me. It's waiting for the right time. It's been tricky because, with the Lily Wong books, I had to do the second book, and I had to do it in a year, and I had the third book, and I have all these different things that I needed to write and need to edit and all these things. But yes, there is a book that is set in Bali and dives into Balinese occult Hinduism, which is really fascinating. And I love the research for that book. And I am very excited to, at some point, dive back into that world.
Fabulous. Well, I always have my closing question, but before I get to that, are you going to be appearing anywhere, any conferences, or are you going to be on any panels, or anyone where one of those aspiring folks might sit in and get a chance to hear you speak in person, or maybe even get a chance to say hello?
Oh, goodness. Well, depending on when this is going to air. So we're having this conversation at the beginning of May. And so I'm embarking on, all the pre-launch stuff. So you can stay up to date by going to my website, torieldridge.com. And on the contact page, you'll find all my upcoming events. And that will show everything. But at this moment, I'm getting ready to go to StokerCon in Denver, where we will be pre-releasing. And that's very exciting. A whole bunch of, tons of fabulous interviews and podcasts and things to come. And then I go to New York City for the Thriller Fest conference, which is very exciting. Oh, and while I'm there, this is going to be fun. And it'll probably be on my website, so you can find it on the readers page. I'm going to be putting together a flash samba video for Dance Among the Flames. And I've got, all my dancer friends. I'm like looking into all the dancers I've known in my life in Hawaii and on Broadway and in film and, all these kinds of things, getting them involved. And this fabulous dancer, Russell Warfield, who I did Cats with, the original First National Company back in, oh my gosh, 1984, is choreographing an Afro-Brazilian modern dance between he and I, inspired between a possession scene between Serafina Olegario and Eshu. And I have no idea what he's going to come up with, but we are going to shoot this in New York while I'm there for Thriller Fest. And I am so excited. I can't even tell you. So yeah, tons of really fun stuff. Go to torieldridge.com. Check out the readers page for book club stuff, check out the upcoming events, check out all that, and follow me on social media. I really love Instagram, writer.tori. I love Facebook because I can really commune with people. I've got Tori Eldridge author, but you can always find me, my personal profile, feel free, Tori M. Eldridge. And of course, I'm on Twitter, Tori Eldridge. So, if you find me and we get connected, you'll be in on all this stuff. So it'll be fun.
Well, and for those of you who are on watching this on the YouTube channel, of course, you'll see all the social media connections on your screen. So you won't have to remember what Tori said to you because they'll be right in front of you. You can go to those. So,
well, now, why didn't you tell me that earlier?
The podcast people need to know too. You're going to pick up some followers, I think. Here, I'm hoping.
But
anyway.
I want to give some shout outs to some independent bookstores because I love them. We just had Independent Bookstore Day. So if you want signed copies, actual signed copies, right? So The Poison Pen, Mysterious Galaxy, Flyleaf Books. Let's see here, Face in a Book, and and Book Soup and Vromans. If you want custom signature book plates, you can check out Book People and Murder by the Books and like that. And you can find all that on my website too. But I really love to tell people about, independent bookstores. So
absolutely. Well, you mentioned one, Face in a Book. I'm quite familiar with that here. That's here in our neck of the woods. So
then you should come to my event. I think I'll be there in June.
Oh, I will be there.
Yeah, it'll be way fun. I think June 17th, if I'm not mistaken. It'll be fun.
As long as I'm in the state, I think I am. I will be there. I promise you. That sounds great. So let me end. I like to always end on a fun question. You get these all the time from me, so I'll give you the standard one. I have the power, maybe not the mystical power, but the power to put you together with any one of the following three people for whatever, a dance, a dinner, a drink, whatever you would like, conversation. Which one would you choose and why? And the options I'm going to give you this time are probably the greatest soccer player in history, the great Brazilian soccer player Pelé, the great Gisele Bündchen, or her husband, Tom Brady. Any one of those three, I could power to put you together with them for a nice long conversation. Who would you choose and why?
Okay, I need a translator, but I want to sit down with Pelé. That would be incredible. I mean, as a lifelong athlete, as a person just enthralled with Brazil, there's so many different things that I would love to talk about. I would love to hear his story and his upbringing and his challenges, and that would be great.
Yeah, that would be fun. I had a feeling. Well, Tori, thanks again. As always, you're always welcome on the open mic anytime. I love your writing. I love your perspective and your insights into the industry. I think anyone who is thinking about writing a book, or maybe has even already done it, they really could look toward you as someone as a really great role model for maneuvering this industry, because it can be very tough. But you seem to have a fabulous perspective on it, and it's really great to see you having such success. I hope Dance Among the Flames does the best of any book you've ever done, and topped only by the one you do next, etc.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us. I appreciate it. I will look for you in June if you're at Face in the Book. I promise you, as long as I'm anywhere around, I will be there. for all those of you out there, if you've enjoyed this, and I hope you did, please hit the subscribe button. I'm always being joined by fabulous writers like Tori who have a lot to share about this industry. No point to go out and spend all this money on craft books. You just come listen to good folks here. That's the way we do it, right? Anyway, I am Rich Ehisen. This has been the open mic for myself, for Tori this time. Until next time, we will see you on the next episode. And I like to say the same thing every time, which is, tomorrow is not promised to any of us, so make today count. All right, we'll see you next time on the open mic.